One undrafted wide receiver on this Denver Broncos football team has been making plays throughout training camp, and Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett gave him some praise today after practice. Not to mention, what is defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero's outlook in the preseason when it comes to evaluating players? You get that and much more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, everyone? Welcome into Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast here on the Locked on Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in and making Locked on Broncos your first listen of the day every single day, whether you listen on your favorite audio podcasting platform or whether you watch us here on YouTube. Thank you so much. Do us a favor, hit that subscribe or that like button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more every single day, all year long. From the South Stands to the end zone, I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, senior Broncos analyst and reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my co-host, Sayre Bedinger. He's the site expert, predominantlyorange.com. Sayre, my friend, hey, day 11 of Broncos camp in the books. Only a couple days remain, and we're really looking forward to Thursday's joint training camp practice with the Dallas Cowboys. But you know what? There's a lot of other storylines that are ongoing right now in the preseason before we get to that first game, and one of them has to be about an undrafted wide receiver who just continues to make plays at Broncos camp.
That's right. Obviously, there's been a number of wide receivers making plays, but I feel like lately this guy's really been standing out. Brandon Johnson, the rookie who we mentioned before, and I think it's worth repeating again. This is a guy that he went to the same high school as Pat Surtain. He was recruited out of high school by Denver Broncos wide receivers coach Zach Azzanni and actually committed to play for Zach Azzanni at Tennessee, where he spent the first few years of his collegiate career, ended at UCF this past year, and really he was one of those players that in college football, maybe he's an older rookie, but he really utilized that extra year of eligibility that the pandemic allowed a lot of players, and he utilized that to really the best and fullest extent. He went out and had 11 touchdowns at UCF and parlayed that into an opportunity with the Denver Broncos. And now here we are, and you've been able to see up close, Cody. We've seen some highlights here outside of Denver, outside of the training camp facility, but man, you've been able to see up close. This guy's really making an impression on this coaching staff.
He is, and you know, here's the thing that stands out about Brandon Johnson too, because the Broncos, they're rotating in wide receivers everywhere. It didn't matter if they're even going to be a practice squad guy that we project to be. They've been rotating different wide receivers in with the first team. And Brandon Johnson, he's worked with the first team. He's worked with the second team. He's worked with the third team. And he's caught passes from Russell Wilson, Josh Johnson, and Brett Rippon. But here's the thing. I have yet to see him drop a single pass during team periods. I have not seen that. He's done a really good job of carrying over, you know, what he's working on with Zach Azzanni and position-specific drills, tracking the football through the air, and then going out during the team periods and making those types of plays and also blocking on the perimeter. He's been one of those guys that has caught, I think, everybody's eye so far, you know, especially people that have not been able to watch practice. They've heard the name Brandon Johnson being brought up on Twitter several times. Now it's the preseason here this Saturday against the Dallas Cowboys in Power Field at Mile High. Of course, Locked on Broncos is going to have complete coverage and recap of all the action, but this is an opportunity for Brandon Johnson to really come in and maybe solidify a spot on this Broncos roster, considering the injury to Tim Patrick. But what's even more impressive is how he's kind of risen up to the challenge a little bit. And after Monday's practice at the UCL Training Center, I was able to ask Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett a question about what he's noticed from Brandon Johnson and how he stepped up after the injury to Tim Patrick.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon's done a really good job. It's not too big for him. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, we put him in, I think it was on Saturday. He kind of did a couple things and had a great little double move for a big gain in the 2-minute situation. So, you know, again, there's so much great opportunity out here right now. So when anything happens, you just want to see people that capitalize on it and get better and get the trust of the quarterback and the coaching staff. And he's doing a fine job.
And he's done just those things, getting the trust of Russell Wilson, getting the trust of the coaching staff, because he's doing exactly what he's being coached to. And he's also getting on the same page with Russ when it comes to just sitting on a route or getting open. You mentioned the double move that we saw on Saturday against Ronald Darby in the 2-minute drill. I mean, Brandon Johnson is a guy that can, I think, if he has a strong preseason game this weekend against the Cowboys, I feel like, considering where the Broncos are at with receiver outside of Courtland, Jerry, KJ, and even Montreal Washington, maybe he can lock up a roster spot here this weekend.
Well, really what's going to be key there in terms of locking up that roster spot to me is going to be whether or not the Broncos feel like they can subject some of these guys to waivers, because ultimately, if you're willing to lose a guy, that's a tough question you got to ask with a lot of these players, right? We've mentioned a number of young receivers have been stepping up, but if you feel like you have somebody, and we said this before, and I think it's worth repeating, because you can't really replace, quote unquote, Tim Patrick, right? You can't replace him, but you never know when you're going to find the next Tim Patrick, because that's what Tim Patrick was when he came into the league. He was a guy that the Broncos really saw up close and personal at joint practices when they had the San Francisco 49ers in town a few years back. And then they signed him later that year to the practice squad after the 49ers let him go. So, I mean, it's just what you do when you make it, you make the most of an opportunity. And for me, Brandon Johnson is a guy that if you're going out there and doing this with Russell Wilson, if you're going out there and doing it against the top defense, to me, that is very, very significant. And if I'm George Payton, if I'm Nathaniel Hackett, and we're coming together, and even Russell Wilson being lumped in there of saying, hey, Russ, what do you want to do as we build this wide receiver room? Like, who do you want here for the season? Who do you want in the rotate? If they're giving him that kind of clout, I feel like Russell Wilson really likes this guy, and I'm not saying that Russell Wilson is this top scout or anything like that, but the dude knows ball, obviously. And Nathaniel Hackett, George Payton have to decide, if we're going to only keep 6 receivers, we're going to be cutting some good players, some good young players with upside. And the Cowboys, who are coming to town for joint practice and a preseason game, they need wide receivers. So it's not like it's kind of a similar situation to last year, where you kind of felt like maybe the Vikings could steal a wide receiver. And I think they even ended up having the preseason star, or the undrafted guy from Colorado State, Warren Jackson? The Vikings ended up getting him for a little bit. So there you go. The fears realized. So, I mean, the Dallas Cowboys could easily poach somebody if the Broncos decide they like a receiver, but they're willing to subject him to waivers. I think Brandon Johnson, you're going to have to keep a close eye the rest of this week.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I was standing on the sideline talking with Alexis Perry, Benjamin Albright this morning, and that's exactly what I said. I said, hey, like, if I'm the Cowboys on Thursday when we have joint practices with them, if I'm a member of the Cowboys scouting department, I'm watching the Broncos wide receivers and I'm saying, hey, who can stand out? And I think they pay attention to a lot of the media stuff too. So I think we do a good job as media members hyping up some of these young receivers. But yeah, you're right. The Broncos can't afford to let the wrong guy go. And so much will shape out based on what is needed position wise, on the offense or defense. Are there other positions that have greater need or greater value for a player staying on that you have to cut a guy? To me, I don't think that the Broncos will do that here with the wide receiver position. But then again, stranger things have happened in the world of the NFL. I did want to touch on one thing, Sayre. Russell Wilson actually has his own office in the Broncos facility. It's literally right above the media tent. He goes in there and he watches film. Like, he's got his own office as if he's working for the Broncos as a member of like the front office staff. That's really awesome. Cool, though. But that's just the next level of preparation that he really brings things for this Broncos team. But in terms of preparation, Broncos country, I know a lot of people are wondering, what will the Broncos do? How will they evaluate players in the preseason? I had a chance to ask Ejiro Evero a question about how he's going to evaluate players. He shares that with me. We're going to get that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about the sponsor of today's episode, Lockdown Broncos. It's our good friends over there at Built Bar. Built Bar, as you know, is the best tasting protein bar that is on the market today. And if you haven't tried the Built Bar Puffs yet, you are depriving yourself of one of life's greatest joys. And guess what? There's a brand new flavor ready. Delicious, indulgent cookie dough covered in chocolate. That's right. Built has done it again with the cookie dough chunk puff. You can get that flavor, and you can get the 9 amazing original flavors at built.com. The thing I really like about Built Bar, they taste great, taste like a candy bar, because the bars are covered in 100% milk chocolate. They're soft, they're easy to chew, but I really like the macros of it. 17 grams of protein, 130 calories, and only 4 grams of sugar. That is tremendous value for something that is covered in 100% milk chocolate. And I want you and your family to get your hands on a box of Built Bar today by going to built.com. And when you go to checkout, make sure you use promo code LOCK15, and that's going to get you 15% off your next order at built.com. Broncos defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero is preparing for his first game in the NFL as a defensive coordinator. There's a lot of things that he's looking forward to just from the coaching side. But when it comes to the player side, how might he evaluate things? Thank you so much once again for making Lockdown Broncos your first listen of the day every single day on your favorite audio podcasting platform or here on YouTube. Do us a favor. If you're watching us on YouTube, you see that little bell notification down below. Hit that button, because every time we post a new show, you're going to get updated. You're going to get a notification. It's going to tell you that, hey, there's a brand new episode of Lockdown Broncos make sure you tune in, hit that like button and comment for the algorithm as well. Sayre, my friend, Ejiro Evero preparing for his first game as a defensive coordinator here in the National Football League. Some processes change a little bit. When you're the defensive coordinator, there's so much that you have to do, whether it's getting the game sheets ready, the play call sheets, getting your personnel sheets laminated. I mean, they have assistants that do things like that, but it's making sure you have all your ducks in a row. So that way you go out on the field on Saturday, which he will be on the field. He's not going to be up in the box. More than likely, Dom Capers will be up in the box. You're going to have everything that you need. So on your first game, your first process, you're going to try to get into the field like, hey, this is what we're going to do in season. And then you can learn maybe what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And then you can make those adjustments by the time the regular season rolls around here. But I tell you what, for the defense, they've been making plays. They've been flying around. And I think everyone wants to know, like, are the Broncos going to play certain star players? And Ejiro Evero, I think, had a really great answer in Monday's press conference. He said, there's certain players on this defense that, we've seen enough of them to know, like, hey, okay, we know exactly who they are. And I think he's alluding to guys like Kareem Jackson, Justin Simmons, Bradley Chubb, Patrick Surtain, Jonas Griffith, all these guys, the studs that really stand on the Broncos defense. I'm excited to see what Ejiro Evero can throw out here in his first game as a defensive coordinator on Saturday.
I am too, because this is really not necessarily, we know it's not about scheming against a specific, group. This isn't going up against Dak Prescott and CD Lamb and all these different things. You're really trying to, in the preseason, you want to see your guys execute your defense, obviously, but I think more so than anything, you want to see young players really get the opportunity to go out and just do what they do best. So to me, this is where a coach has the opportunity to shine and put those players in great position to succeed, right? And there's a lot of young players on this Broncos defense that we kind of assume they're going to be a super successful unit this year based on the early returns for sure, but also because we think this depth is better. I think I think you and I can speak for you on that, Cody. I feel like the depth is better this year for the most part on this Broncos roster defensively. So getting to see these guys go out there, it's really going to be in this game a lot about how can you put these players in best position to succeed and really highlight their skill set, because these guys are trying to make a roster. They're trying to earn their way into the rotation, and you're trying to really decipher a lot of tough position groups. Like, who are you going to keep at safety? There's more players on the roster than are going to make the team at the safety spot. The same could be said of corner, the same could be said of edge, and the same could be said of D line. I don't know necessarily about linebacker yet. We'll see what the preseason holds for that, Cody. But to me, I feel like you have so many questions that need to be answered. It's going to be all about putting these young players in position to succeed.
Well, and one thing I asked Ejiro Evero, how is he planning on evaluating players? Now, I brought it up as a defensive back question because for me, I love DBs. I want to know how he evaluates defensive backs. I know Christian Parker will be responsible for a lot of that, but as a DC, you always like to get maybe their brain on. And he gave me an answer on pretty much how he's evaluating all the young guys at every position on the defense here this upcoming Saturday when the Dallas Cowboys come to town. Here's what Ejiro Evero had to say.
Well, at the end of the day, it's not just the DBs, it's all the positions, but we're looking for guys that want to compete. The lights aren't too big for them. And, my philosophy in the preseason, we're not too much worried about scheme. The game plan is going to be more tailored towards execution and evaluation and seeing guys winning one-on-one matchups. And so that's what we're looking for.
And I think that's really important, though, because in the preseason, it's different. You're not in the preseason when you're playing an opponent. You're not preparing. You're not watching film on the Dallas Cowboys. There might be certain things you may see like base formations that they can reference from last year, but Denver's not coming into this week saying, okay, hey, we're watching an hour of Dallas Cowboys film and we're going to carry that preparation over to the preseason. Denver is solely focused on themselves, and Ejiro Evero really touched on that. I like what he said, too, because for young players, this is going to be the first time for some of them at the NFL level where they're going into a loud stadium, where there's going to be fans, where the bright lights are going to be on because the game is in the evening at 7:30 p.m. Mountain Time. How do they respond to that moment, right? Because even Nathaniel Hackett said it last week. Sometimes it's going to be a really good test for our team because sometimes you see the players who practice really well, but then the lights come on and all of a sudden they become a little bit of a different player. They play a little too conservative. They play a little bit too tight in a sense. It gets them a really good feel on maybe how their young players will step up to situations. And it's a great way to evaluate whether or not they can be ready in the regular season. If something were to happen to a key starter, can this young guy step in and maybe play at the same level or, not have much of a drop off there. And I think that's super important, but more so he says, just about execution. It's not about scheme. We want to see what we can do. Can we execute? Can we make plays? That is a great mindset to have here for the preseason. And I'm excited to watch it.
It's the perfect mindset, honestly. Exactly what he said is exactly why I love the preseason. I love to watch players go out there. You want to be viral on Twitter for the best reason after a preseason game, right? You want to be the guy that's whooping a tackle for 2 or 3 sacks in a game. You want to be the one that's getting an interception or forcing a fumble or getting TFLs and getting the fan base talking about you. You want to be that guy out there winning the one. That's what people are watching for in the preseason. Nobody really cares about the score, although I fall into Nathaniel Hackett's camp of being disappointed when they lose anyway. But I mean, that's just a competitor's mindset. I know there was a funny article by Pro Football Talk about that and how that, we'll save that for another time. But Ejiro Evero is 100% spot on about this because you're watching these one-on-one matchups. You want to watch, offensively and defensively. You want to see the offensive tackle keep a pass rusher at bay, and then defensively, you want to see your pass rusher whoop up on somebody. So I think that's what the Broncos have the opportunity to do here. And that's what the preseason is really for, right? You're getting a lot of guys that, like you said, they're going to be part of your rotation. You're going to be counting on these guys at some point. So can you rely on Nick Bonito to go out there and win a pass rush in a regular season game? Is he going to be going up against the same tackle? No, but that's why you talk about execution, because if you can go out there and execute a pass rush move, you might be able to do it against one of the better tackles in the league if it's a good move. It doesn't matter if you're executing against a second or third team offensive tackle in the preseason. You go up, you give your best, and you put the best on tape and make sure that you're executing, doing things at a high level, doing things with the right fundamentals, and making sure you're out there letting your athleticism be kind of taking a back seat to the growth that you've had all offseason, right? The studying that you put in, the memorizing of the playbook, like they were talking about this last week at practices, really just going out there and playing fast. That's what you want to see in the preseason, not necessarily, oh, well, we really shut down, whatever wide receiver number 7 for the. I mean, that's not what you really care about. You want to go out in
Yeah.
there and you want to see Fionn Hicks and Damari Mathis and say, wow, he had a really great pass breakup when the ball was put in his direction, right? So that's what we want to see. It's not necessarily about the result, it's about execution.
That's what it's all about at the end of the day. And real quick, too, special teams coordinator Dwayne Stooks had mentioned that for Brandon McManus this upcoming Saturday, one thing you will see, he wants to kick the ball and he wants to force the Dallas Cowboys to return it so he can get a better idea if the kickoff unit can cover effectively. And that's the thing. Look, Brandon McManus, we know, can boot it out of the end zone every time, but they want to challenge the Broncos a little bit. Dwayne Stooks does. He wants to challenge his young guys. Can they do exactly what we've been coaching them to do in terms of staying disciplined in their coverage lanes, getting down there and making a tackle? That is a good test, and I'm excited to see that as well this upcoming Saturday. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I, we're going to get into some news and notes from day 11 at the Broncos training camp at the UC Health Training Center, including how practice ended with a highlight reel play. But is there a concern about a potential injury to a key player on the Broncos defense? We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about our good friends over there at Dave. Hindsight is 2020, and you can't change the past. But what if you could get a little bit of help from your future self? Maybe you'd ask to borrow a little cash. Now you can with Dave. And Dave is the banking app that can help you get up to $500 instantly with extra cash. That's more money to fill your tank, to buy a wedding gift, or to catch up on bills. And you can finally tackle those expenses that have been stressing you out without any hangups. There's no interest and no credit check needed. Millions of people have already downloaded the Dave app to get the financial relief that they need with extra cash. So if you're in a pinch and you need some extra help, download Dave and think of it as a helping hand from future you. Download the Dave app from the App Store right now. That's DAVE. Sign up for an extra cash account and get up to $500 instantly. For terms and conditions, go to dave.com/legal. Instant transfer fees do apply. Banking provided by Evolve, member FDIC. Future you will thank you. Day 11 of Denver Broncos training camp is in the books as we prepare for day 12. Only a few more days of training camp practice before they close things out with a joint practice with the Dallas Cowboys. And then, bam, it is the first preseason. Thank you so much, Broncos Country, for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Sayre, Bedinger, and myself, we have it covered here on YouTube and also on your favorite audio podcasting platform. Thank you so much for spending your day with us here to talk all things Denver Broncos news, content coverage, and more. Sayre, my friend, I want to go over some recap of day 11's practice on Monday at the UCL Training Center. Some highlights. The Broncos getting some good news back when it comes to the injury front side of things because K'Wan Williams returned to practice. And Jonathan Cooper returned to practice as well. DJ Jones was back on the practice field as well. And then a little bit of a concern, Greg Dulcich worked back off to the side on the side field. And Nathaniel Hackett said after practice that the hamstrings are really tricky. And really, they're just taking a very precautionary step here with Dulcich because the goal for them is to have him fully healthy by week 1, which I think is the right priority there.
It is, you want to see these guys playing week 1, no doubt. And so I think getting K1 Williams and Jonathan Cooper back, first of all, is really big. And specifically for Jonathan Cooper, because we've talked a number of times, that edge position is absolutely loaded. So, I mean, we need to see him out there on the field. And I've said this before, and you can tell me if you disagree with me on this one, Cody, because of how loaded that room is right now. But I feel like what Jonathan Cooper showed as a rookie with the Denver Broncos, and not just in training camp or the preseason, because we know he was very good there, but what set him apart is what he did in the regular season. And it's specifically, and not maybe coincidentally, against the Dallas Cowboys last year. He had maybe his best game as a pro. So really, I think what he did as a rookie prevents him from being cut. I don't know. And I don't know if that's going to end up being the case, because how many guys can you actually keep at the edge position? You want to keep them all if possible. But to me, I just don't know how you could justify that. I think a lot of Broncos fans would be shocked by it. I think a lot of Broncos fans would be upset by it. Not that that matters in the end, right? But I think that just the perception of cutting Jonathan Cooper, if it came to that, if you had, we got Aaron Patrick, Baron Browning, Nick Bonito, Malik Reed, Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb. I mean, typically teams are keeping 4 or 5 edge guys. The Broncos have 6 or 7, for sure 7 that are, I mean, so roster construction is going to be huge, but I think it was great to see Cooper back out there. Obviously he had the surgery on his finger earlier the offseason, so definitely good to see him back out there.
It is good to see him out there, and he's going to be needed for this Broncos defense, especially inside the nickel. I mean, nothing against Sayre Bassey, but, there's a noticeable drop-off when it goes from K1 Williams to a Sayre Bassey. When we just talk about size, like K1 Williams has pretty good size to him to play that nickel really well. A Sayre Bassey, a little bit shorter, a little bit undersized at that position, but still finds a way to put himself in position. I thought he had a really good coverage play on Courtland Sutton. It did draw a pass interference call on him, though, but you know what? I'd rather him get flagged for a PI than giving up a big touchdown downfield. So they're going to have to work him in some reps there, because he's going to have to be a guy that steps up inside the nickel if, in fact, K1 Williams does go down at any point during the regular season. But let's talk about another Broncos undrafted wide receiver, a rookie who's been making plays as well. Jalen Virgil has been one of these under-the-radar guys, Sayre. He's been making some good plays one-on-ones on Saturday, but more so on Monday's practice. He had a deep catch down the right sideline, about 40-plus yards over Michael Ojemudia, and he just hauled in. He did a really good job tracking the football. It was a well-placed throw by Josh Johnson. And for Michael Ojemudia, he's given up a couple of plays downfield. I think the biggest thing here for Mike, and this is just my observation from watching practice, I just think he needs to finish on the ball, and that's it. Like, he's getting in position, locate the hip if a guy gets behind you, and just finish. Make a play on the football. Understand when that receiver's putting his hands out, you watch and you go to make a play on the hands. Like, that's exactly what you do. When he brings his hands out, that's when you can attack the hands there. But they're doing a lot of really cool stuff with Michael Ojemudia. I think it's good to make mistakes in practice here at training camp, and I think that not a lot of people highlight that. Like, you don't want to just be perfect in practice and at training camp the entire time. You want to make mistakes. Practice is the place where you're supposed to make mistakes, where you're supposed to throw some interceptions every once in a while, where you're supposed to get beat for a touchdown. It's about being able to carry that over and not make that mistake in a game-like atmosphere. So that is something to keep an eye on. But let's talk about the conclusion of Broncos practice here today, and kind of a move the ball period, not necessarily how you normally see it. The Broncos, it was a third down period, Sayre. So the Broncos offense was backed up at third and medium, sometimes third and long. Russell Wilson unloaded a deep ball to Courtland Sutton down the left sideline. Ronald Darby was in coverage, and Darby did a really good job, kind of similar to what we saw with Patrick Surtain, like shielding, staying in front of Courtland Sutton, and Sutton just rose over the top, and he caught the ball and landed over the top of Ronald Darby. Darby came down on his hand there and was down for a little bit of time after practice. We have no update on what it is. I know that the team medical staff is looking into it, but just a freaking phenomenal play by Courtland Sutton. It drew it to where all the wide receivers, everybody in the offense was running down the field, and they went and celebrated in the locker room and then came back out. Darby, it's hard to judge because, obviously when you give up a catch, everyone's like, oh, Darby got mossed. Like, yeah, he got mossed. It's going to happen. But I think technique-wise, he was in a very good position, and he just couldn't make a play to finish on the football. Courtland Sutton did. He won that 50-50 ball in a big-time way. God, Sayre, it was a good play. Courtland looks unbelievable. He looks amazing. And the Broncos are going to rely a lot on Ronald Darby this season. So I think we're going to be very eager to see if there's any kind of update on Darby throughout the next couple of days.
Yeah, we will be certainly keeping close tabs on that because he'll be a key piece of the defense. So hope he's all right, and hope he's just kind of able to shake it off and get back out there to practice. But with Courtland Sutton, I feel like that's a really big piece of this story, just because last year we weren't really able to see Courtland Sutton do a lot of mossing over defensive backs. The ball just was not put in a place for him to do that very often. To be that guy who in his rookie season and back in 2019 for sure, I mean, he was earning that 60-40 kind of nickname, where it was like, it's not 50-50 when you throw to Courtland Sutton. He's got the clear advantage. So to hear that he's out there and he's done this a number of times now at practices, it sounds to me like, first and foremost, I think that people need to understand last year he was coming back from a torn ACL as well. And Cody, what that's like. I don't know what that's like personally, but I'm sure the first season coming back after a torn ACL, I'm sure it's a little bit of mind games going on there. So so you confirm that. And then obviously now he's coming back, obviously feeling more confident on the knee, feeling more confident with the QB, putting the ball in a place where he can go and get it. And I think for Courtland Sutton, man, he got the big contract, which isn't as big as some of his peers out there. I think he's going to prove to be one of the biggest values in the NFL this season, and arguably the offensive MVP for the Denver Broncos. I know there's been a lot of talk about Jerry Jeudy lately, and rightfully so. He's having a great camp. But Courtland Sutton, to me, is that guy that he just does everything at the wide receiver position. I know we say that about Jeudy as well, but Sutton is that guy that you can just throw the ball in his zip code and he's going to come down with it and make a big play. I see a huge season coming from him. And I think with Russell Wilson, that trust is really developing there to be able to throw the ball downfield in a third down situation. And we saw it earlier in camp in a fourth down situation as well. That's trust from your QB and wide receiver right there.
Trust and rust, they kind of go together there with Courtland Sutton. The Broncos will continue building on the offense and the defense heading into the regular season here in just a few weeks. And the Broncos will be on the road to open up Monday Night Football against the Seattle Seahawks and some former Denver Broncos. In the meantime, we'll have covered all throughout training camp. There's only 3 days remaining, but there's still practice ahead. And we have you covered all throughout the preseason here on the Locked On Broncos podcast. Tuesday is a big day for Broncos country because that's when the NFL and the other owners around the NFL will be voting on the transition of ownership for this Broncos football team. Sayre, Bedinger, and myself will be back on Tuesday for a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, recapping day 12 at the UCL Training Center, but not to mention the ownership update as well. Tomorrow, the Broncos are expected to officially have brand new owners with the Walton and Penner Group. We'll break it all down here on the Locked On Broncos podcast.